guys, welcome back. The last time I left you, if you don't already know, this is my Twin Flame Tell All series. This is part 2, so if you didn't already, go watch part 1. Go watch part 1. I'll link it above. And this is part 2. So this is all about the karmic relationship. And I want to preface this by saying, this is just my experience, okay? This is not necessarily the dynamic of all karmic relationships. These are the things that were necessary for my soul and my evolution in this human lifetime. So this is, my experience. And those of you out there, I think also that are wondering, am I with a karmic? Am I with a twin flame? I don't want to repeat cycles. What do I do? I think this part of my story is going to actually be really helpful for you. So let's dive in. I'm very excited to share this with you. It's definitely, there's some dark aspects to it. So, kind of trigger warning if you've been in any kind of abusive or narcissistic relationships. This may trigger you. And as you guys, if you did watch part 1, you know that I got emotional over there in part 1. So who knows what's going to happen here in part 2, because this is the first time I've really opened this back up since living this experience. And it's been now almost 4 years, I think. So I'm really interested to dive in with you guys and just really explore this karmic relationship. So with that being said, where we left you off was it had been a matter of days between me making the decision to leave my soulmate relationship and pursue kind of this karmic relationship. Now, on my behalf, it was not a decision to pursue this relationship, okay? So I had kind of decided to leave my soulmate relationship. I wasn't going in the right direction. I wasn't moving where I felt like I needed to be moving on a soul evolution of my journey. And I want to be honest with you guys, that was one of the hardest decisions I had ever made, because I truly felt like I was a part of that family, right? I truly felt like his parents loved me. I loved them. I loved who they were. I loved his brother, loved his sister. I just loved being in his family. I felt like I fit and I belonged there, and that was a key thing for me in my relationships. I know for some people it's not important that they get along with their significant other's family, but I think because I felt so other in my family, I was always looking for a home in my significant other's family. So it's very important when I spent time with them that I felt safe and secure and I felt protected by my partner and all these things, and I had that with my soulmate relationship. It was just the relationship itself that was the thing. So moving into this crazy synchronicity of events that led me to meeting my karmic partner. And this is why in the beginning I actually confused, and I actually forgot about this, I confused my karmic partner with my twin flame because we had so many signs and so many synchronicities. And this is why I always say, just because you have signs and synchronicities does not automatically make it a twin flame. Okay, there's other elements that need to be at play there besides just signs and synchronicities, because if you're on any kind of spiritual journey, you're gonna have signs and synchronicities leading you towards even soul tribes, soulmates. You're gonna have that with your soul family. So just know that. And you also can have, obviously, with karmic relationships. And I truly believe, if I didn't believe that this was my twin flame, I thought my karmic was my twin flame, and if I didn't believe that, I don't think I would have stayed in the relationship as long as I did, which is important. So that will come up later. So keep watching. So I'm in the matter of leaving my soulmate relationship, and I'm working as a hairstylist outside of Chicago at this time, and I'm starting to get into the spiritual community. I've been meditating a lot, very consistently. I'm getting into the spiritual community. I'm meeting people like myself, which I'd never experienced before. And so I see on this meetup group, there's a shamanic dream circle. And at this point, my past experience with dreams, based on the psychologist I saw when I was young, was extensive. I loved dreams. I loved dream analysis, and I still do. But this was calling to me. It was literally flashing lights, you must go. But I was you know what? That sounds super cool, but I'm booked with clients for that whole night. So there's not really much I can do. 3 or 4 different people moved, canceled, and rescheduled in order for me to go to that thing. I had a full night booked literally the day before. It comes to the middle of that day and everybody leaves. And so I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going home early. I'm driving to this group meditation circle, and that's that. And so I was so excited, but also super nervous, and I had no idea what to expect when I got there. And actually, when I got there, when I saw the facilitator of the group, I was like, he reminds me of somebody. I was like, he must be like the husband to one of my more like spiritual clients or something like that. Like I just had a feeling that I had like known him before. Which a lot of people get with, soulmate relationships and things like that, like past life history, So basically I came in, I sat down, he was very kind, very generous, very like open, and that was like very new for me to have somebody that was so authentic to themselves. And so we have the dream circle, and nothing really happens. I say, okay, cool, this is a cool experience. I get a message later that he had found me on Meetup based on my like reservation for the dream circle, and he sent me a message like, oh, if you want to come over for tea sometime, like don't be a stranger. And I was like, wow, that's something I would not have originally agreed to had I still been with my soulmate. But now that I'm literally days from being single, I was like, oh wow, okay, maybe that's a good opportunity. And so then in the midst of all of this, he also has another workshop that he's doing on traveling the world and being a nomadic lifestyle, which is what I was super into at that time. I wanted to travel. I wanted to go see new things, do new stuff. And so I took my mom with me. I remember because I actually had moved out of the house that I was living in with my soulmate. I'd moved out of that house and I took my mom with me to this other workshop that he was teaching. And I remember when my mom and I left, I was still super depressed because I had just broken up with somebody that I thought I was going to marry, So I was very sad. I was very low. I knew my mom was going because she thought it was interesting, but she more so just wanted to support me and do stuff with me. And what's really interesting is I remember coming out of that workshop and being like, he's going to teach me something. He's going to teach me something. And he's vastly older than me, which is also, when you read about twin flame things, it's like one of the qualifiers of a twin flame relationship is that they can be significantly older than you. So this guy was, funny enough, 11 years older than me. And, so to me at that time in my life, signs and synchronicities meant everything, right? So I was like, oh, and this, and this. And even if things didn't fit, like it was important to me to make them fit. And so finally, after that other workshop, I was like, oh yeah, let's meet for tea. So he invited me to come stay, or not come stay, sorry. He invited me to come visit his house and to chat and to talk about things. And at this point, I had zero clue what was going to happen. Like I was incredibly naive. I was incredibly, I don't want to say young because it's not like I was super young, but in mentally, I was very naive about what I thought was going to happen. I was like, oh, he's going to teach me something. He's going to help me create the life I want to create, or, something, maybe he's going to be my life coach. Who knows? And so I went to his house and we had a lovely conversation. I was not really attracted to him at all when it comes to, like what my original type was. I was really not attracted to him at all. And I can't remember now I don't think it was this instance, but I think I had met with him a second time. And we talked a lot about amazing spiritual stuff. For me, it was so new to actually connect with somebody that actually knew about spiritual things and had done the things he had done. He had hitchhiked around the world. He had this long list of achievements. And I was like, wow, I really looked up to him, and my first mistake, you guys, as anybody would tell you with a karmic partner, the first mistake you can make is putting them on a pedestal. And that's exactly what I did. I threw away the power dynamic, like right off the bat. And I was also very much in my disempowered empath stage at that time, where I was still understanding and learning that I was highly sensitive. I was an empath. I was all of these things. So I didn't have a good control over that. So there was a lot of things that he told me that, you know, in my values and my core beliefs, I might not have agreed with, but because that's what he said he was into, I was like, oh yeah, 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 yeah. And that's what I did all day as a hairstylist anyways, was just like agree and validate people regardless of my own thoughts and opinions. So whenever somebody would just start talking to me, I'm like, yeah, and so I know for a fact my karmic partner was only interested in open relationships. And I know for a fact one of the primary first conversations we had was that he didn't want to be in a closed relationship. And I was like, yeah, coming off of the experience I had just had with my soulmate, which is like the fear that I had broken and disregarded my word, which was when we got engaged, I said I was going to marry him. And then, you know, months later, our relationship starts falling apart. And so I had a lot of guilt and shame around that. And I was very disillusioned by marriage because of what I had experienced at the end of that relationship. So when my karmic partner said, yeah, I'm not into closed, you know, monogamous relationships, I'm like, oh yeah, cool, that's cool. And at this point, I'm not even interested in him romantically anyways. I can tell there might be a vibe coming off of him, but again, I figure because he's so much older than me, there's nothing really going to happen. So then it's like one or two or the third time we hang out, and he comes in really close to me, and I know he's coming in to kiss me, and I tell him to stop. I was like, stop right there. And I know that that to him, you know, as very much like an empath narcissist dynamic, that was like, I don't want to say a trigger. It was like one of those things where you're like, oh, now it's a game, you know, now it's like, okay, how can I get this? How can I conquer this? And that was very much this person's mentality, was how can I manipulate this into working for me? And I want to make a disclaimer right now as I'm saying this, is that a lot of what I say about my karmic partner, right, is going to almost paint him in a bad light. But that's just because it's from my perspective. This person is not necessarily a bad person. This person is just, you know, living their lives by the means that they have. And I really hope that they learned a lot of lessons from the duration of our relationship, because it definitely was a rocky one. It definitely was a toxic one. And I hope they maybe have changed. But you know, at the end of the day, that's outside of my control. And thank goodness that I'm not still there. So this was, what's interesting timing wise, you guys, is this is when COVID was happening. So the entire world was shut down. We didn't have access to other people, other places, other things. And so it was really just like him and I dreaming about, you know, trips and doing things. And we went camping during COVID, and my salon was shut down, so I had all this free time on my hands, and so I was doing work for him. And you know, like we kind of were just like thrown together like really quickly. And that's kind of when I realized like I needed to explore some of my edges, and by that I mean, you know, expand myself in ways that I hadn't done previously. You know, I'd really played it small in terms of my relationship with my soulmate. And now so many new horizons were being opened to me that I was like, oh my gosh, like the whole world is my oyster. You know, the whole world is open to me. This person has traveled everywhere and has a very nomadic lifestyle, which is exactly what I was looking for at that time. So moving through this relationship, I won't, you know, I'm just literally spending 15 minutes talking about the beginning of this relationship, but the power dynamic was set up for me to fail no matter what. Like the way I put him on a pedestal was like, he knows everything, I know nothing. And that was literally like, I dug my own grave completely. And again, if you've ever been in any kind of a codependent or narcissistic or empathic relationship, you will understand like how much you need them to be okay and how much you need their validation in order for you to be okay. So it was like everything I could do to build him up, and everything he would do to build himself up was like what I also needed to stay afloat. So I felt like I was constantly, especially in the later portion of our relationship, I was constantly trying to manage the implodes that were coming. And there were so many things that happen, you guys, that I don't want to put anybody on blast here, but if you're wondering about karmic relationships, like, they can get ugly, 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 okay? There was like definitely some kind of substance abuse going on. There was definitely like really unhealthy, like, just life patterns. And then there was also a lot of manipulation when it came to like our relationship, okay? Like, I was very codependent on him, so I'm not going to take myself out of the scenario, because I also had things that were completely unhealthy about myself. And part of that was that I needed his validation, and we did not have a secure relationship at all. So I developed a very anxious attachment style, and especially due to the nature of being in an open relationship, I was really navigating like, okay, how do I allow my partner to have freedom while also feeling safe? And I just want to share with you guys, like, that was not easy at all. And I never really got there because we never built a safe and secure foundation. Um, and I really wasn't given a choice. So for people that are approaching an open relationship, like, it has to be done with the utmost care, the utmost concern and respect for each other. And the way it was presented in my relationship was, I'm angry, I'm mad, so I'm going to go off and do this thing and blow off some steam, and I'll see you when I see you. And I wasn't given much choice in the matter, right? I was included, like, oh, do you want to come with? But if it was like I didn't want to come with, then it's like, okay, bye, I'm doing this on my own. So there was never really an option. I never had the control. And that's part of putting somebody on a pedestal is, the person that cares more loses at the end of the day in those type of dynamics. So with my karmic partner, I was traveling around the United States. We were constantly, or I felt like I was constantly under the threat of my relationship, being pulled apart by various other partners. I never felt validated for any of the fears I was experiencing. So we spent the bulk of our relationship dealing with internal struggles between the two of us. And it was like, well, you did this, or you did this, or I'm angry at you about this, and I'm going to go do this, and screw you because of this. And so like the amount of peace that we had in our relationship was basically zero. And the only way that we thrived together was with what we were creating, which at this time was a cross-continental African safari trip where we had interviewed and accepted 11 applicants. Again, see, we had all these kind of signs and synchronicities with a lot of the things that we were doing, which kept me hanging on to the fact that he might be my twin flame. Interestingly, we never had a separation point though, so that's kind of interesting. For those of you wondering about twin flame versus karmic. But this was probably the most abused and gaslit and neglected I've ever been in a relationship. And again, I allowed it all, right? I accepted it all. And so this trip that we were working on with 11 of our kind of friends, and I hadn't known any of them. They're past people that my karmic had traveled with or partnered with on certain things. And so they're all very, very, very cool people. So we were learning how to manage group dynamics, how to, bring spirituality into business. And that was one of our major conflicts as well, which was we could never get on the same page with the heart-centered business. Like, he always had such a wound around business and around how to do business. And I always came from a place of overgiving. So it was like we were just so not compatible on every single level. And what ended up bringing the demise of this project was actually the second round of COVID. So we had had a lot of our funding done. And this is where, like, this relationship, I had put aside my better judgment for everything he said. So I'll even give you an example. In the very beginning of the relationship, I was coming off of hormonal birth control because it didn't resonate with me anymore, and I didn't want to do that to my body. And the first thing he says to me is, oh, well, you need to get on birth control because, we don't want to have a baby. And I took that on myself, and he was like, well, I also don't want to wear a condom and all these things. And I was like, oh, well, of course. And then I had an IUD put in, which I completely regretted the moment it was in. It caused me so much discomfort, so much pain. It caused me super uncomfortable and terrible periods. And I had stopped listening to my better judgment and my intuition because I was valuing somebody else's over mine. And so in the duration of this relationship, I did that again and again and again. I would have a little voice in my head saying, Serena, no, that's not good for you. You're not going to be happy with that, blah, 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 blah. And he would say something else and I would drop myself. And so I really deteriorated all trust within myself because I valued somebody else's opinion over mine. And there were various times where, there were blow-ups over this, right? Like I would try to fight, but then it would always come down to, well, I'm going to break up with you. I'm going to leave you. I'm going to, so it was like I would be kind of gaslit into a way of not thinking my stuff was valid. And then the threat of you won't get to have me anymore was also thrown in there. So it was always like, I'm going to leave if you don't do X, Y, Z, right? If I don't get my way, I'm going to leave you. This is what I want, so that's what's going to happen. And so the demise of this project came with second round of COVID when basically our second round of funding didn't come through. So we had funded the project. I had put so much of my own money in this, you guys. It's insane. But I had it to spend, so it doesn't really matter one way or the other. But we couldn't get it off the ground. So we were then faced with a choice. Do we try again later, or do we go anyways? And so there was something so deep within me that said, go anyways, go anyways. And this was one of the hardest decisions of my life because it meant hurting 11 or 9 of our team members that were supposed to go with us, because only one other person could afford it on their own without the funding coming through. And I was paying for both my trip and my karmic partner's trip. Again, you see that overgiving, right? Overgiving, putting somebody else on a pedestal. And so I paid for both of our trips, for our flights, for our food, for our accommodation, for pretty much everything. And at this point, things were rocky with us at best. We were all very, very stressed because we've been trying for almost 2 years to get this project up off the ground, and we can't manage to do it. And so we're like, okay, well, let's go on the trip anyways and see if we can find somebody on the continent of Africa that would want to sponsor and create this, right? Because it's about this continent. And so we go to South Africa. We are spending tons of money just kind of traveling around and trying to meet different people and contact different media companies and all of these kinds of things, right? So we're going around, we're doing all these things. We can't manage to get anybody to help us. So what we end up doing is we end up saying, okay, now we have a bigger decision to make, which is, do we just start doing the trip ourselves? Because again, my karmic partner was like itching to go. He was absolutely just incredibly difficult to manage at this point, and I was so stressed. I was just withering away. I was like almost down to nothing. And me managing to leave this relationship, and it kind of begins at this point, is like me beginning to listen to myself, right? And so I really strongly listened to myself when I said, no, we need to go. We still need to go on this trip, and I'll pay for it, like if that's really what it comes down to, is like, I will do it. I will lift this whole thing and will it into fruition, right? And so then we get to a point where we're on the trip and we get COVID, and we have to surrender that this trip is never going to happen. So we spent almost a month sick, staying in hostels in South Africa before we're like, okay, this project is not going to get off the ground, and we're going to all just waste away here waiting for it to happen. And so basically at that point we decide to start traveling. And so we buy a car, we start traveling, and we're having consistent fights throughout the entire thing. Like my karmic partner wanted to go on Tinder dates. Like, he wasn't interested in the spiritual aspect of what this trip was supposed to be at all. Like, he was just interested in blowing off steam, having fun, which, it is all good and well, having fun, sure. But like the purpose of this trip was completely corrupted by ego. And so I was traveling with 2 guys, and I was the only female. And so I felt incredibly disempowered most of the time, especially like if I had anything to voice or anything to say. It was always kind of a 2-against-1 situation. You're being too sensitive, you're being too much. Definitely my perspective was gaslit quite consistently. And I got to a point where I really just had enough, and I knew I needed to start letting go. And not even on a physical level, but I needed to start letting go on like a mental and emotional level, because if I kept holding on, I was gonna run the risk of being severely damaged. So at this point, I'm getting over everything. And this is as we're making our way into where my twin flame is staying at the time. So he's working as a surf instructor at a backpackers lodge. And so we are traveling towards him on our trip. And I'm just getting so fed up. My karmic partner is getting so fed up. We're getting so fed up of each other. We're getting so fed up of the whole dynamic of the trip. And so I meet my twin flame. We all meet him in the same time at the same place. And I don't even know what to say. Like, everything shifted from that point. Like, I was doing so much work. I was sitting in the car meditating every single day. Like, I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. I was letting go. I was like, you know what? I need to let go mentally. I need to let go emotionally. And that was the process I was moving through with my karmic partner. And I originally was like, you know what? I think we can continue this trip, but I just want to be friends. And he kind of laughed me off and he's like, yeah, okay, haha, that's really funny. And he was like, sure. And I'm like, no, seriously, like, you go do whatever you want, and that's that. And then when he realized, like, oh, she's actually starting to carve me out, that's when he started to kind of realize, okay, something is going on here, something's happening. And that was the point in which I met my twin flame. And so when I met my twin flame, it was like the whole dynamic shifted. And I met this person. I was like, I want to know more about this person. I feel like so familiar, so magnetized to this person. There are just so many things that led me here that could not have happened any other way. Literally, like, there was so many times in the trip and so many different places we could have even chose to stay at, and we chose to stay there. And so after 2 days of staying there, the guys are getting an itch. I want to stay longer, of course. I don't really understand why at this point, but I want to stay longer. And the guys want to leave. And I feel like I'm at home here. I'm like, oh, this is a place where I could totally settle down, not knowing that my person home is the reason why. And the guys are getting super antsy, especially my karmic. He's like, nope, we gotta leave. We gotta get out of here. This place will suck you in. This place will bleed you dry. And, like, completely turning it around. And so I'm like, you know what? Okay, I need to honor, rather than doing what I want to do, which is stay, I need to honor my group and my team member, and I need to be loyal and faithful. And so I leave with them, and I am like devastated. And I wasn't expecting to feel this way at all. So what I end up doing is I do this meditation in the car, and it was so profound, you guys. I did this meditation in the car as we were leaving the place where my twin flame was. And I am almost like imagining like a tree system, okay? So there's like this tree system, and I'm like trying to take him as part of myself so that I don't feel separate from him, and I don't feel like I regret not have pursuing him, or I don't feel like I've lost anything. And when I go to try and take him as myself, I like realize he's already a part of my tree. Like, he's already a part of my tree. And I'm like, whoa, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean that, like, we aren't two different trees? We're literally the same tree. And I'm just reclaiming that part of my own tree. And I had this like massive heart awakening. And I was like, what the heck does that even mean? And so this is when everything really starts to change and things start to get crazy. And so my karmic partner is like, I want to go on a Tinder date when we get to the next town. We're going to stay there for a couple days. We're going to fix some stuff with the car, and I want to go on a Tinder date. And I'm like, okay, that's fine, but can you pay for it yourself? And so I ask him, I say, I want to sit down and talk to you about finances. And the fact that I asked him to pay for his own Tinder date rather than me paying for his Tinder date, I know that sounds crazy, you guys, he had a major blow up. And he was like, I'm going to quit the trip. you screw you guys, I'm gonna go do this the rest myself. And so I'm devastated. And I go to the other person we're traveling with and I'm like, look, me and you can continue on our own. Then he comes back and tries to cut me out of the trip altogether. And he's like, no, you need to go home and we're going to continue without you. And so he's trying to kick me out of the trip. And so we have this major blowout. These poor people that we were staying in their like B&B, we have this major blowout. And I'm like, screw you guys. I'm going back to where my twin flame was because I didn't get to experience the trip that I've wanted to experience has been completely blown out of proportion by what you two have wanted to do. So I'm not taking that anymore. I'm going back there and I'm going to have whatever experience I want to have. And so I do. And this, guys, will have to be for part 3 because we are getting really up there in time. But if you watch this whole thing, let me know in the comments below what you think. And yeah, not too many emotions coming out here, but it's just wild to think of all the things that led us to this point. And that, like, so much, you guys, that I didn't even share in here. So much happened between me and my karmic, and I was like so beyond broken. Like, I cannot even tell you how broken I was when I met my twin flame. And I can't wait in part 3 to share like our first experience of each other with you, because it's like most twin flame stories, it's just like something out of a movie. So I'm really excited to share that with you. Stay tuned. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know your own karmic stories or your own twin flame stories in the comments below. If you need more support, you know where to look. And we'll see you in the next video. Big love. Bye.